friends. I hope you are always healthy, always happy and successful. This time we will discuss again famous scientists in the world again. Well, it doesn't take long for us to see this one. Enjoy watching.
Here's a little biography of his story. Alfred Bernhard Nobel was a Swedish chemist, engineer and businessman who invented dynamite. In his will, he gave his fortune to make the Nobel Prize. Birth, October 21, 1833, Stockholm, Sweden. Died, December 10, 1896, Sanremo, Italy. Siblings, Ludwig Nobel, Robert Nobel, Emil Nobel, Betty Carolina Nobel, Rolf Nobel, Henrietta Nobel, Emanuel Nobel. Parents, Emanuel Nobel, Andriette Nobel. Nationality, Swedish. Books, Nemesis, Alfred Nobel, his life and work, known for inventing dynamite, Nobel Prize. Alfred Bernhard Nobel was a Swedish chemist, engineer, and businessman who invented dynamite. In his will, he gave his wealth to make the Nobel Prize. Alfred was born on October 21, 1833 in Stockholm, Sweden. His father's name was Emanuel Nobel and his mother's name was Andriette Alsell Nobel. Alfred's father was an engineer and inventor. He built bridges, buildings, and experimented with various ways of blasting rock. Alfred had two older brothers, namely Robert, born 1829, and Ludwig, born 1831. In the same year that Alfred was born, his father's business lost and closed. In 1837, Emanuel Nobel decided to try his luck elsewhere and moved to Finland and Russia. Alfred's mother remained in Stockholm taking care of his family. Alfred's mother, who came from a wealthy family, started a grocery store. From there he could support his family. Meanwhile, Emanuel Nobel's business in St. Petersburg, Russia is starting to climb. He had opened a machine shop that supplied equipment to Russian soldiers. He also made the Russian Tsar and his generals believe that sea mines could be used to repel enemy ships attacking St. Petersburg. The mines prevented the British Royal Navy from entering the St. Petersburg during the Crimean War, 1853 to 1856. Having succeeded in Russia, Emanuel is now able to move his family to St. Petersburg, 1842. In 1843, Andriette gave birth to a son who was named Emil. The sons of Nobel were educated by private tutors. They received various subjects such as natural sciences, languages, and literature. By the age of 17, Alfred was fluent and wrote in Swedish, Russian, French, English and German. During overseas trips, Alfred was very interested in the fields of language, chemistry, and physics. His father wanted him to follow in his footsteps and did not appreciate Alfred's talent for poetry. He decided to send his son abroad to study and become a chemical engineer. In Paris, Alfred works in the private laboratory of Professor T.J. Palouse, the famous chemist. There he met the Italian chemist, Ascanio Sobrero. After the first 3 years, Sobrero had discovered nitroglycerin, a highly explosive liquid, which he deemed too dangerous to use. Alfred became very interested in nitroglycerin and its use in construction work. When he returned to Russia after his studies, he worked with his father to develop nitroglycerin as a commercially and technically useful explosive. After the Crimean War ended, Alfred's father's business retreated and he decided to return to Sweden. Alfred's two older brothers, Robert and Ludwig, live in Russia to try to manage the legacy of the family business. They were successful and continued to develop the oil industry in southern Russia. After the return of the Nobel family to Sweden in 1863, Alfred concentrated on developing nitroglycerin as an explosive. Unfortunately, this experiment led to a disaster that killed several people, including his younger brother, Emil. The Swedish government decided to ban this experiment within the city limits of Stockholm. Alfred did not stop and continued his experiments on the barge above Lake Mälaren. In 1864, he was able to begin mass production of nitroglycerin, but he did not stop experimenting with various additives to secure production. The story of the discovery of dynamite. Alfred discovered through his experiments that a mixture of nitroglycerin with fine kieselguhr soil would turn the liquid into a paste that could be molded into rods, which were then drilled into the borehole. This discovery occurred in 1866. Alfred obtained a patent on this material the following year. He named it dynamite. He also invented a detonator or explosive plug that could be ignited with a fuse. This discovery was made when the diamond crown drill and wind drill came into common use. Taken together, these inventions helped reduce the losses of many construction works such as drilling channels, blasting stones, building bridges, and so on. He owned many factories. Dynamite and detonator plugs sell well in the construction industry. Because of this, Alfred was able to build factories in 90 different places. He lives in Paris but travels frequently to his factories in more than 20 countries. He was once described as Europe's richest traveler. He worked intensively in San Remo, Italy, Hamburg, Germany, Ardèr, Scotland, Paris and Sèvres, France, Karlskoga and Stockholm, Sweden. He also tried making rubber and synthetic leather and artificial silk. In addition, he also makes gelatin, ballastite, artificial gemstones, and others. Until his death in 1896, he had 355 patents. Alfred never married, but he had female friends. One day, he announced in the newspaper to recruit a secretary. Austro-Hungarian woman Bertha Kinsky von Chienik und Tettau took the job. After working for a short time, Bertha returned to Austria to marry Prince Arthur von Suttner. Alfred and Bertha Sophie Felicitas Baronin von Suttner became constant friends and wrote letters for many years. Bertha Pun was active in the peace movement. He wrote the book Throw Your Guns. When writing his will to determine the Nobel Prize, Alfred Nobel included prizes for bodies or individuals who promote peace. Alfred Nobel's life can be said to be very full of obstacles. At the time he was researching in Paris with one of the young people named Fehrenbach. At that time Nobel had just introduced his new invention, smokeless powder. However, a person who claimed to be Paltasia asked how to make it. And so, even though Nobel realized it was a war enthusiast who would use it carelessly, he told how to make it. But, just as Paltasia was about to leave, in front of Nobel's house there was already a real policeman, and which was painful. Other war maniacs tried to make him and use him brutally. Nobel is angry that his inventions are not used for peace. After experiencing that, terrible things happened again. Nobel accused of plagiarizing smokeless powder belonging to others. Nobel was in prison for 2 months and the Nobel factory which produced smokeless powder was closed. After Nobel was released from prison, he decided to research in San Remo. Nobel worried Fehrenbach while in San Remo. Again, a storm came into Nobel's life. Nobel formed a committee called the Gunpowder Committee. One of its members is the British inventor, James Dewar, the inventor of the vacuum bottle. Nobel always announces his findings to the committee. And so, since James was a member of the committee, he knew how to make smokeless powder. So, James betrayed his close friend by creating a patented smokeless powder under the name cordite. Nobel, who suffers from hardening of the arteries, is shaken and decides to go for a walk on the beach, the story of death and the Nobel Prize. Alfred died in San Remo, Italy on December 10, 1896. In his last will and testament, he wrote that much of his wealth could be used to reward those who have done committees, humanitarian efforts in the fields of physics, chemistry, literature, peace, physiology and medicine. Medicine. Not everyone likes this. His will was contested by his relatives and contested by authorities in a number of countries, and it took 4 years for his superintendent to convince all parties to live up to Alfred's expectations. In 1901, the first Nobel Prizes in physics, chemistry, literature, physiology and medicine were distributed in Stockholm, Sweden, and the Nobel Peace Prize in Kristina, now Oslo, Norway.
So that's a little story. Hopefully you guys will know and be smart, and add insight, inspiration, innovation for all of us. Thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to watch the next story. Good to see you again. Bye, bye.